Of course. Here is a multi-part dramatic story written to feel like a real-life account of betrayal and resilience. What happens when the perfect life is a perfect lie? For Genevieve Davenport, a Manhattan heiress pregnant with her first child. Her husband's concern felt like the ultimate act of love. He insisted she needed a break, a getaway to the most exclusive wellness retreat imaginable, a place to protect her and their unborn baby from the stresses of the world. But while she was being chauffeured to a paradise in upstate New York, her husband, Connor, was boarding their Gulfstream G650. And in the seat next to him, sipping his champagne, was Genevieve's best friend. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of a gilded Côte d'Or, a prison disguised as paradise, and a diabolical plan far more sinister than a simple affair. The air in their Park Avenue penthouse always seemed to carry its own specific scent, a blend of white peonies, old money, and the subtle clean fragrance of Connor's ambition. For Genevieve Davenport, it was the smell of security. At 32 years old, she was the sole heiress to the Davenport technology fortune, a legacy built by her father's quiet genius. But it was her husband, Connor Montgomery, who had taken that legacy and made it raw. He was the charismatic face of Davenport Industries, the deal-maker, the man who could charm a boardroom into submission with a single devastating smile. They were New York's golden couple. His sharp, tailored Tom Ford suits were the perfect complement to her elegant, understated style. Dior and Loro Piana were her staples. Their life was a carefully curated masterpiece featured in the pages of Architectural Digest and gossiped about on page 6. Now, at 6 months pregnant, Genevieve felt she was on the cusp of having it all. The final perfect piece was on its way. Yet a thread of anxiety had woven itself into the fabric of her pregnancy. It wasn't just the usual jitters of a first-time mother. It was the city, the pressure, the constant hum of expectation. She'd had a few dizzy spells, one fainting episode at a charity gala that had sent Connor into a panic. Her obstetrician, the renowned Dr. Lena Hansen, had assured her everything was fine. Her blood pressure was a little high, but manageable. She just needed to rest. Connor seized upon the word rest, as if it were a holy scripture. "You're pushing yourself too hard, Jen," he said, one evening, his voice a velvet blanket of concern. He knelt before her, his hands resting gently on her swollen belly. The city lights twinkled like a fallen constellation behind him. "This baby, our baby, is the most important thing in the world. More important than any quarterly report or board meeting." Genevieve leaned back into the plush sofa, her hand covering his. "I know, Con. I'm trying. I've cut my hours back at the foundation. It's not enough," he insisted, his blue eyes earnest. "The city, it's toxic. The noise, the pollution, the stress. I've been doing some research. I found a place. The perfect place." He described it in breathless, glowing terms. "The Haven, a private wellness sanctuary in the Hudson Valley. It wasn't a spa. It was a holistic prenatal experience. Organic meals prepared by a Michelin-starred chef, guided meditation by a world-famous guru, private yoga sessions, air purified to alpine standards. The guest list was a secret, but it was rumored to be a haven for A-listers and royals seeking absolute privacy. And the best part, Jen, he'd said, his voice dropping, is their digital detox policy. No phones, no laptops, no news. Nothing to stress you or the baby. Just total blissful peace for your final trimester. A cold knot formed in Genevieve's stomach. No phone. For 2 months, Connor. I can't be completely cut off. There's the foundation, my father's estate, and you. I'll handle everything he promised, stroking her hair, and we can schedule a weekly call on their landline. Think of it, darling, a fortress of tranquility, just for you and our little one. It was then that Beatrice Novak, Jen's best friend since their days at Brown University, had walked in. She used her own key, as she always did. B was the yin to Jen's yang, fiery artistic and perpetually struggling. While Jen inherited a fortune, B inherited debt and a fierce, hungry ambition. Genevieve had always been her safety net, funding her failed art galleries and listening to her endless relationship dramas. "Did I hear Fortress of Tranquility?" B asked, dropping her vintage Chanel bag on a chair. She was wearing a dress Genevieve had given her last season. It looked better on B. Most things did. Connor stood and gave B a warm, familiar hug. "I'm trying to convince Jen to take a real maternity leave." "At the Haven?" B's eyes widened. "The Haven, Jen, that's not a retreat. That's a legend. They say the wait list is 3 years long." "How did you even get a spot?" Connor gave a self-deprecating shrug. "I made a significant donation to their expansion fund. I told them it was an emergency, a father's prerogative to protect his family. He looked so noble, so decisive." B rushed to Jen's side, her expression a mask of ecstatic support. "Oh, Jen, you have to do it. You look exhausted. It would be the most incredible gift to yourself. Imagine no emails, no board meetings, just peace. I'm so jealous I could scream." Trapped between her husband's overwhelming concern and her best friend's effusive excitement, Genevieve's reluctance felt selfish. Was she putting her own mild anxieties ahead of her baby's well-being? Connor and B exchanged a look, a quick, affirming glance that made Jen feel like a difficult child. "Okay," she finally whispered. "Okay, I'll go." Relief washed over Connor's face. He kissed her deeply. "You won't regret this. It's the best thing for us." The 2 weeks leading up to her departure were a whirlwind. Connor was astonishingly efficient. He had his executive assistant, a woman of terrifying competence, pack everything Jen would need. He met with her lawyers, assuring her he would oversee the details of the Davenport Foundation's new wing. He even had her sign a thick stack of documents. "Just standard power of attorney stuff," he'd said, casually pushing a pen into her hand as she was trying to decide which cashmere throws to take. "It's so I can approve payroll and handle any financial hiccups with the estate while you're unreachable." Abernathy drew it up. Mr. Abernathy had been her father's lawyer for 40 years. The name was a seal of trust. Genevieve, distracted and overwhelmed, signed where Connor's finger pointed her mind already on the color of the nursery. The day she left was a crisp autumn morning. The black Escalade idled silently at the curb. Connor held her, his face buried in her hair. "I'll miss you every second," he murmured, "but I'll be so calm knowing you're safe." B was there too, tears in her eyes. She hugged Jen tightly. "Call me the second you're allowed. I want to hear everything. Be safe. We love you." As the Escalade pulled away from Park Avenue, Genevieve looked back at them. Connor had his arm wrapped around B's shoulders, pulling her close in a gesture of shared comfort. They looked like the ones left behind, the ones grieving. A strange, fleeting image flashed in her mind, not of two friends comforting each other, but of a king and queen surveying their newly conquered kingdom. She shook her head, blaming the pregnancy hormones. This was a good thing, a necessary thing. She was going to a fortress of tranquility. The drive upstate was 3 hours. The haven was located down a long, winding, private road marked only by a discreet bronze plaque. The estate was breathtaking, a sprawling stone manor set amidst acres of manicured gardens and dense forest. It was silent, utterly, profoundly silent. A woman with a serene smile and eyes that didn't quite match it greeted her at the door. "Welcome to the haven, Mrs. Montgomery. I am Dr. Alcott, the director. We are so pleased to have you." Genevieve was led to a beautiful, spacious suite overlooking a tranquil lake. The furniture was minimalist and calming. There were no sharp edges. There was also no television, no radio, and no telephone. "Your health and serenity are our only priorities," Dr. Alcott said smoothly, gesturing around the room. "Your journey to peace begins now. A nurse will be by shortly to collect your personal effects, including your mobile phone and jewelry. We find they are anchors to the world of stress you've left behind." Genevieve's Cartier watch, a gift from her late father, felt heavy on her wrist. The wedding band from Connor felt cold. She handed them over, along with her phone, feeling a profound sense of disconnection, a terrifying lightness. "Your husband has arranged everything," Dr. Alcott added, her smile unwavering. "He sends his deepest love. He asked us to tell you to trust the process. He's taking care of everything." Genevieve sat on the edge of the bed, the silence of the room pressing in on her. She trusted Connor. Of course she did. 5 hours later, and 3,000 miles away, the roar of 2 Gulf Stream engines was the only sound. The custom-outfitted G650 climbed steeply out of Teterboro Airport, its wings slicing through the clouds. Inside, the scent was not of peonies, but of expensive leather and Dom Perignon. Connor Montgomery loosened his tie, the mask of the concerned husband melting away to reveal something harder, colder, and infinitely more triumphant. He turned to the woman sitting across from him, her legs elegantly crossed, a flute of champagne in her hand. Beatrice Novak raised her glass, her eyes no longer filled with faux tears of friendship, sparkled with a diamond-hard brilliance. "To the haven," she said, her voice dripping with irony. Connor clinked his glass against hers. A cruel, satisfied smile spread across his face. "To the haven," he repeated, "and to Zurich." Bea laughed, a sound that was sharp and predatory. "I can't believe she bought it. The whole digital detox nonsense. She bought it because she trusts you," Connor said, reaching across the table to run a hand down Bea's arm. "And because she thinks I love her." "And do you?" Bea asked, her head tilted, a playful challenge in her eyes. "I love what she represents." Connor corrected his gaze, turning avaricious. "The Davenport name. The company. The access, but the woman herself. She's become an obstacle. A sentimental, pregnant obstacle." He stood and moved to the seat beside her, his arm sliding around her shoulders in a gesture that was a chilling echo of the one Genevieve had seen from her car window. But the obstacle, he whispered, his lips close to her ear, is now safely tucked away in a place where no one can hear her scream. A place that my shell corporation just happens to be the primary investor in. A place where the good Dr. Alcott owes me a great many favors. Bea shivered a mix of excitement and fear. And the power of attorney, it's solid, ironclad. Connor confirmed. Thanks to you telling her Abernathy's name was on it. A brilliant touch. By the time she's due for her one scheduled weekly phone call, the Davenport Industries accounts will be as empty as her suite is of sharp objects. He kissed her, then not a tender kiss of a worried husband, but the hungry, brutal kiss of a co-conspirator. As the private jet streaked across the Atlantic, carrying them not to a vacation, but to the systematic destruction of Genevieve's life, the last vestiges of their betrayal burned away, leaving only the cold, hard reality of their shared greed. They weren't just stealing a husband or a fortune. They were stealing a life, a future, and a legacy while its rightful owner was being gently, methodically erased, locked away in her fortress of tranquility. The first 48 hours at the Haven passed in a blur of disorienting calm. Genevieve's days were structured with a gentle but unbreakable rigidity. A 6 a.m. wake-up call with a tasteless herbal infusion, an hour of silent meditation as the sun rose over the lake, a breakfast of quinoa porridge and berries eaten alone in her suite. Then came the treatments. There was prenatal yoga with an instructor who moved with an unnerving, boneless grace and never spoke above a whisper. There were hydrotherapy sessions in a dimly lit, salt-scented pool, and there were the daily consultations with Dr. Alcott. These sessions were the centerpiece of her stay. They took place in Dr. Alcott's office, a room that was as serene and sterile as the rest of the facility. The doctor would ask gentle, probing questions about Genevieve's childhood, her relationship with her father, her anxieties about motherhood. She framed it all as clearing the emotional pathways for a peaceful birth. Your husband mentioned you've been feeling overwhelmed, prone to bouts of anxiety, Dr. Alcott said on the third day, her pen poised over a leather-bound notebook. Her eyes were placid, but they missed nothing. I suppose so, Genevieve admitted. It's been a stressful year. Taking on more responsibility at the foundation, the pregnancy, it's a lot. And your fainting spell. Connor was deeply concerned. He said you were distraught, that you've been having trouble distinguishing between what's real and what is just pregnancy-induced fear. A prickle of unease ran down Genevieve's spine. Distraught? No. I was just embarrassed, and my doctor in the city said it was perfectly normal. Dr. Alcott gave a small, condescending smile. Of course, city doctors are wonderful, but they don't always appreciate the delicate interplay between psyche and soma. That's our specialty here. We just want to ensure your mind is as healthy as your body for the baby. With every consultation came a small cup of vitamin-infused tea. Dr. Alcott explained it was a proprietary blend of botanicals designed to lower cortisol. But after drinking it, Genevieve felt foggy. Not sleepy, but muted. Her thoughts felt slow, syrupy. Her anxieties were gone, but so was her edge, her clarity. It was becoming harder to remember the specific details she wanted to discuss with Connor on their scheduled Saturday call. She began to notice other things too. The other guests, she only ever saw them from a distance, seemed to drift through the hallways like ghosts. They had the same placid, vacant expressions. One afternoon, she saw a woman, a famous actress she recognized sitting on a bench by the lake, weeping silently into her hands. A nurse appeared instantly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder and murmuring something before leading her away. The next day, the actress was back in the dining hall, smiling her serene, empty smile. The fortress of tranquility was starting to feel like a sulk, a beautifully appointed, softly padded cage, but a cage nonetheless. The staff were all polite, but their kindness was impersonal, programmatic. They were guards, not caregivers. Her suspicion crystallized on Friday afternoon, the day before her scheduled call with Connor. Walking down a corridor she hadn't used before, she heard raised voices from behind a door marked Staff Only. It was Dr. Alcott, her serene tone replaced by a sharp, angry hiss. Unacceptable. The dosage must be precise. Montgomery was explicit. We need her compliant and docile, not comatose. We're building a medical file here, not a criminal case. Get it right. The door opened suddenly, and a young, flustered-looking nurse nearly collided with Genevieve. The nurse, whose name tag read Sarah, looked terrified. She stammered an apology and hurried away, her face pale. Genevieve froze, the doctor's words echoing in her mind. Montgomery was explicit, compliant and docile, building a medical file. It wasn't about wellness, it was about control. Connor wasn't protecting her, he was managing her. This entire place, this entire Rishurit was a lie. The fog in her mind began to recede, replaced by the ice-cold clarity of fear. She had been tricked. She had walked willingly into a trap laid by her own husband. But why? The reason landed in her gut with the force of a physical blow, the power of attorney. The documents she'd signed without reading. That night she pretended to drink the vitamin-infused tea, palming the cup, and pouring it into a potted plant when the nurse wasn't looking. She needed a clear head. For the first time in days, the world came into sharp, terrifying focus. In a glass-walled office overlooking Lake Zurich, the world was already sharp. Connor Montgomery, exuding confidence, sat opposite a stern-faced Swiss banker named Herr Ziegler. B, playing the role of his indispensable advisor, sat beside him. Her notepad open, a Patek Philippe watch, a new gift from Connor, glinting on her wrist. "The documentation is all in order," Connor said smoothly, sliding a folder across the polished mahogany desk. "The power of attorney is comprehensive. My wife, Genevieve, has entrusted me with full authority over her financial affairs while she is on an extended medical leave." Ziegler perused the documents, his expression unreadable. "Indeed. Very thorough. The transfer of assets from the primary Davenport Industries accounts into the newly established Montgomery Global Holdings entity is significant." He peered at them over his spectacles. "A complete liquidation of her liquid holdings. My wife and I believe in a more aggressive, diversified strategy." Connor lied with practiced ease. "We're moving into emerging markets. It's a joint venture." "Of course," Ziegler said, his tone dry. "We will begin processing the wire transfers. However, there is one complication." He tapped a finger on a separate, thicker document. "The Davenport Legacy Trust. This was established by Mrs. Montgomery's father. It is an irrevocable trust. The assets within it, nearly $250 million in foundational stock and real estate, are untouchable without the primary beneficiary's direct personal consent." Connor's smile tightened. "The power of attorney covers all trusts." "Not this one," Ziegler countered. Mr. Davenport was a very cautious man. "The bylaws are explicit. Any liquidation or transfer from this trust requires a wet signature in the presence of a trust officer, or in this digital age, a confirmed biometric voice and video authorization from a secure, pre-registered device. A simple power of attorney, no matter how comprehensive, is insufficient. The trust was designed specifically to prevent this exact scenario." B shot a nervous glance at Connor. This was a problem. A big one. Connor's charm didn't waver, but a dangerous glint appeared in his eyes. I see. My father-in-law always thinking ahead. So what you're saying is we need Genevieve to authorize it herself. Prezes Ziegler confirmed. Precisely. On the flight to their next stop, a bank in Georgetown, Cayman Islands, where they planned to set up the final layer of their offshore maze, the mood was tense. $250 million just sitting there. B fumed, pacing the length of the cabin. This ruins everything. It doesn't ruin anything, it complicates things. Connor snapped his voice sharp. He was staring out the window, his mind racing. We have control of the main company. That's enough to bankrupt her. The trust is just the grand prize. So we just leave it. After all this, Connor turned from the window, his expression dark and calculating. No, we don't leave it. We just have to adjust the timeline. We get the authorization, how B demanded. Break her out of the haven for a field trip to a bank. She knows she's a prisoner by now. You said it yourself. She's not going to cooperate. She won't have a choice, Connor said slowly, a sinister idea beginning to form. We have her isolated. We have Dr. Alcott. We're building a medical file that paints a picture of a woman who is mentally and emotionally unstable, paranoid, delusional. He walked over to B, taking her by the shoulders. When we get back, we accelerate the process. Alcott's file will be thick enough to petition a judge. We'll get a court order declaring her incompetent to manage her own affairs. The court will appoint a guardian to make decisions for her. And that guardian will be you. Bear finished, a slow, admiring smile spreading across her face. Her loving, concerned husband. Exactly, Connor confirmed. As her legal guardian, I can authorize anything on her behalf, including the dissolution of Daddy's precious trust. He pulled her into a fierce embrace. It will just take a little more time. A little more persuasion. By the time we're done, Genevieve won't just be broke. She'll be officially, legally insane. And the baby. His eyes turned chillingly cold. The baby will need a stable, loving home. With us. Saturday arrived. It was time for Genevieve's scheduled call. Her mind, now free of the chemical fog, was racing. She had one chance, one short, monitored conversation to signal for help. She was escorted to Dr. Alcott's office. A single old-fashioned landline telephone sat on the desk. Dr. Alcott sat opposite her, a serene smile on her face. To maintain the peaceful environment, we do ask you to keep the call brief, no more than 10 minutes, and please try to avoid any stressful topics. It was a warning. The phone rang. An assistant answered, then handed the receiver to Genevieve. "Jen, darling, is that you?" Connor's voice, thick with manufactured warmth, came down the line. "Connor," she said, her own voice tight. She had to choose her words perfectly. "I miss you so much. How are you feeling? Are you resting?" "It's very peaceful here," she said, locking eyes with Dr. Alcott. "Everyone is taking such good care of me, Doctor. Alcott is building a very thorough file on my progress." There was a slight pause on Connor's end. "That's wonderful, darling. I told you they were the best." "Yes, you were explicit about that," she said, emphasizing the word she had overheard. "I've been thinking a lot about Dad, about the legacy he left, the things he put in place to protect me." Another pause, longer this time. "Of course, darling. He was a great man. He was a cautious man. Genevieve continued, her heart hammering. He built a fortress to protect his family, an irrevocable fortress. I'm so glad he did. It makes me feel so secure, knowing it's there, untouchable. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. She had hit a nerve. She knew it. Finally, Connor's voice returned, strained but still attempting charm. Well, that's wonderful, Jen. I'm glad you're feeling secure. Listen, I have to run to a meeting. I love you. I love you too, she said, and the line went dead. She placed the receiver back in its cradle. Dr. Alcott was watching her. Her smile gone, replaced by a look of cold clinical assessment. Genevieve had just declared war, and she had done it from the heart of the enemy's camp. She was no longer a patient. She was a prisoner, and she knew with chilling certainty that her captors now knew it too. The game had changed. This was no longer about coercion. It was about survival. The mask was off. After the phone call, the gentle facade of the haven crumbled, revealing the prison beneath. The yoga sessions were no longer offered. The gourmet meals became bland and utilitarian. Her suite, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cell. The silence an oppressive weight. The only person she saw regularly was a burly, silent orderly who delivered her food and the twice-daily cup of vitamin tea. Genevieve knew what was in the tea. She had to fight its effects. With a grim determination, she developed a routine. She would accept the cup, thank the orderly. And then, the moment he left, she would stride to the bathroom and pour the contents down the sink, running the water to wash away the evidence. She would then force herself to drink glass after glass of water, trying to flush the residual sedatives from her system. To keep her mind sharp, she recited Shakespearean sonnets her father had made her memorize as a child. She mentally redecorated every room of the Park Avenue penthouse, and she walked endless circuits around her suite, the baby a constant, precious weight inside her. Her mind was a battlefield. The lingering effects of the drugs pulled her towards a comforting haze, but the adrenaline of her terror, the fierce, primal instinct to protect her child, pushed her back into the light. She had to get out. But how? The windows were sealed. The door was always locked. There were cameras in the hallways. A frontal escape was impossible. She needed an accomplice. Her thoughts turned to the young, flustered nurse, Sarah, the girl who had looked so terrified after being berated by Dr. Alcott. Genevieve had seen a flicker of something in her eyes, not just fear, but conscience. She clung to that memory like a lifeline. Her chance came 4 days later. The orderly was late with her morning meal. Instead, Sarah appeared at the door, her expression nervous. "The usual orderly called in sick," Sarah mumbled, placing the tray on the table. She avoided Genevieve's eyes. This was it. Genevieve took a deep breath. "Sarah," she said, her voice low and urgent. "You have to help me." Sarah froze her back to Genevieve. I don't know what you're talking about, Mrs. Montgomery. You should eat your breakfast." "I heard you," Genevieve pressed, moving closer. "That day with Dr. Alcott, I heard what she said. Montgomery was explicit. Building a medical file. I know what they're doing here. This isn't a hospital, it's a prison, and my husband put me here." Sarah turned around slowly, her face ashen. Tears welled in her eyes. "Please," she whispered, "don't say that. They'll fire me. Worse." "Worse than helping a man drug his pregnant wife and steal her life?" Genevieve countered, her voice raw with desperation. "Look at me, Sarah. I'm not crazy. I'm trapped. He's trying to have me declared incompetent so he can take everything, including my baby." The mention of the baby struck a chord. Sarah's hand went instinctively to her own flat stomach, a gesture of unconscious empathy. "My older sister," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "Her ex-husband did something like this. He convinced to everyone she was unstable. He got custody of their kids. She never recovered." "Then you know," Genevieve pleaded, her own eyes filling with tears. "You know this is real. I can't fight them from in here. I need to get a message out. I need a phone, just for 5 minutes." Sarah was torn, her fear warring with her conscience. She looked at the door, then back at Genevieve's pregnant belly. The silent, unborn child seemed to cast the deciding vote. "I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. "The security is too tight. They check us in and out. No personal phones allowed on the grounds. Dr. Alcott would know." She wrung her hands. "But there might be another way. Getting a message out is impossible. But getting you out? Maybe." A plan began to form in the space between them, a fragile, desperate alliance. Sarah explained that the only time a guest ever left the grounds was for a genuine medical emergency that required hospital equipment the Haven didn't possess. "We have to make it look real," Sarah said, her nursing instincts taking over. "Something sudden and serious, something they can't handle here, like pre-eclampsia. Your blood pressure is already a little high. We can work with that." The plan was terrifyingly risky. Sarah would secretly swap Genevieve's sedatives for a diuretic, a water pill that would dehydrate her. Combined with Genevieve feigning specific symptoms, a splitting headache, visual disturbances, severe abdominal pain, it would create a convincing picture of a sudden, dangerous spike in blood pressure. The facility's on-call doctor would have no choice but to order a transfer to the nearest major hospital, St. Francis in Poughkeepsie, 40 minutes away. "They'll send an orderly in the ambulance with you," Sarah warned. "But once you're in the ER, you'll be out of Alcott's direct control. It's the only chance you'll have." For the next 3 days, they prepared. Genevieve drank the diuretic Sarah smuggled to her hidden inside a bread roll. She felt weak. Her head throbbed, and her body ached with dehydration. But she clung to the pain as a sign of hope. She rehearsed her symptoms, studying the medical information Sarah had printed out from WebMD, and snuck to her. Meanwhile, Connor and Bea had returned to New York. The atmosphere in the penthouse was no longer triumphant, but coiled with tension. Genevieve's coded message had shaken Connor to the core. She knew. She knew about the irrevocable trust, and she had just told him in no uncertain terms that he couldn't have it. "She's smarter than I gave her credit for," he snarled, pacing the vast living room. "That irrevocable fortress line. She was mocking me." "So what's the new plan?" Bea asked. She was lounging on the sofa trying to appear nonchalant, but the worry was evident in the way she twisted a strand of her hair. "We just sit here and wait for Dr. Alcott's file to get thick enough. We can't wait," Connor said, his eyes wild. "She's fighting back. Who knows what she's doing in there, trying to win over a staff member. We have to shut her down. Completely." He stopped pacing and looked at Bear, a new, more monstrous plan dawning on his face. "We force the issue. We create a crisis." "What kind of crisis?" "Alcott's been building a case for mental instability. Let's give her a centerpiece for her argument. A psychotic break." He picked up his phone and dialed Dr. Alcott's private number. "Doctor," he said when she answered, his voice cold and commanding. "It's time to escalate. I want her moved to the high security wing. Full isolation. And I want you to increase the dosage, significantly. I don't want her docile. I want her gone. I want her so far gone that when her lawyer finally sees her, he'll be begging me to take guardianship." There was a pause on the other end. Even the complicit Dr. Alcott seemed taken aback. "Mr. Montgomery, that level of medication could be dangerous for the fetus." "The baby will be fine," Connor snapped. "I'll hire the best neonatal specialists in the world once it's born. Your job is to handle the mother. Do you understand me?" "My private jet is on standby. I want a call from you in the next 48 hours, confirming she's been fully sedated and transferred. If not, our financial arrangement will be the least of your worries." He hung up his chest, heaving. He was no longer just a thief. He was a monster, cornered, willing to do anything to get what he wanted. He had sentenced his wife to a chemical lobotomy, a living death, all for $250 million. On the fourth day, as Genevieve's manufactured symptoms worsened, the moment came. She collapsed on the floor of her suite, clutching her head and crying out in what she hoped was convincing agony. She timed it for the mid-morning check-in. Sarah was the one who found her. She let out a scream that was only half fake. The burly orderly came running, followed moments later by the facility's on-call physician, Dr. Evans, a nervous man clearly out of his depth. Sarah rattled off the symptoms she had observed. "Massive headache. She says she's seeing flashing lights. Her blood pressure on the cuff was 190/110. Dr. Evans's eyes widened in alarm. Those were textbook signs of severe preeclampsia, a condition that could lead to seizures, stroke, and death for both mother and child. "We can't handle this here," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Call an ambulance. We need to get her to St. Francis. Now." Dr. Alcott appeared, her face a thundercloud. She looked from the doctor to Genevieve, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. She knew this could be a ploy, but she was trapped. To deny a transfer in the face of such clear symptoms in front of her own staff would be a gross medical negligence she couldn't risk. She had to let her go. "I'll ride with her," Alcott snapped. "No." Dr. Evans countered, finding a rare moment of courage. "You're the director, not a paramedic. I need a nurse and an orderly. Sarah, you go. You know her case. And you," he pointed at the burly orderly, "go with her." It was a small victory, but a crucial one. As they loaded her onto a gurney, Genevieve locked eyes with Dr. Alcott. The look on the director's face was pure venom. She knew she was being outmaneuvered. The ambulance ride was a blur of bumps and sirens. The orderly sat stony-faced in the corner. Sarah, checking Genevieve's vitals, gave her hand a tiny, imperceptible squeeze. "It's working." They burst through the doors of the St. Francis emergency room. The cacophony was a shock after weeks of enforced silence, shouting, beeping machines crying. It was the sound of chaos, the sound of life. It was the sound of freedom. An ER doctor took charge, immediately barking orders. They wheeled her into a trauma bay, pulling a curtain around her. For a precious few moments, the orderly was on the other side of the curtain, blocked by a wall of nurses and doctors. "Sarah!" Genevieve gasped, grabbing the nurse's arm. "My phone. I need my phone." Sarah, her hands shaking, pulled a cheap burner phone from the pocket of her scrubs. "You have minutes, maybe less. They're going to put you on a magnesium drip for the blood pressure. It'll make you drowsy. Make the call now." Genevieve's fingers trembled as she dialed the number she knew by heart. a number she hadn't called in years, but one her father had told her to never ever forget. The private line for Frank Miller, a private investigator who had been her father's head of security for 30 years. He was old school, fiercely loyal, and tougher than a $2 steak. The phone rang once, twice. "Miller," a gravelly voice answered. "Frank, it's Genevieve Davenport." She choked out, her voice cracking. There was a stunned silence. "Jen, where are you? Everyone's been looking for you. Connor said you were on a cruise, no reception." "He lied," she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a desperate torrent. "He locked me up, Frank. A place called the Haven. He's trying to steal everything. He and Beatrice Novak, they're drugging me. I'm at St. Francis Hospital in Poughkeepsie. I escaped. You have to help me. Please, for my father." The change in Miller's voice was instantaneous. The surprise vanished, replaced by cold, hard steel. "Stay right where you are, kid. Don't talk to anyone. Don't sign anything. I'm on my way. I'll be there in 90 minutes. And Jen, yes, hold on tight. The cavalry is coming." He hung up. At that exact moment, the orderly pushed through the curtain, his face grim. A nurse was approaching with an IV drip. The fog bourgeois was coming for her again. But it was too late. The message was out. The war had a new front, and Genevieve Davenport was no longer fighting it alone. The 90 minutes it took for Frank Miller to arrive felt like a lifetime. The magnesium drip the ER doctors administered did its job, slowly lowering Genevieve's blood pressure, but plunging her into a state of profound drowsiness. She fought to stay awake, her mind clinging to Miller's promise. "The cavalry is coming." The burly orderly from the Haven, whose name she learned was Dimitri, never left her side. He stood like a statue by her bed in the maternity ward where they had moved her. His arms crossed his eyes, communicating a clear message. "You are still my prisoner." Dr. Alcott had called him her voice, a furious whisper on his phone, ordering him not to let Genevieve speak to anyone. But she had already spoken to the most important person she could. Frank Miller did not look like cavalry. He was a man in his late 60s with a crumpled suit, a face like a road map of old sorrows, and eyes that had seen the worst of human nature. He didn't burst into the room. He entered quietly, accompanied by a sharp-looking man in his 70s, carrying a worn leather briefcase, Mr. Abernathy, her father's lawyer. Dimitri immediately stepped forward to block them. "She's not allowed visitors. Doctor's orders." Miller didn't even look at him. His eyes were locked on Genevieve. "That's my client's daughter in that bed," he said to the nurse at the station, his voice quiet, but carrying the authority of a charging rhino. "And this is her legal counsel. The only doctor's orders you need to be worried about are the ones that involve a court order for obstruction and unlawful detainment. Now, are you going to move this gentleman, or do I have my associate, who is currently parking the car and happens to be a retired NYPD captain, come up here and move him for you?" The nurse, intimidated, stammered at Dimitri to stand aside. Abernathy stepped forward, his expression a mixture of fury and grandfatherly concern. "Genevieve, my dear girl," he said, his voice trembling lightly. "What has he done to you?" Tears of relief streamed down Genevieve's face. "He locked me up, Mr. Abernathy. Connor and Bea. They tricked me." "We know, child. We know," Abernathy soothed. Miller turned to Dimitri. "You have two choices," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "You can walk out of this room right now and forget you ever saw us, or you can stay and you'll be named as an accessory to kidnapping and conspiracy to commit fraud. Your choice." Dmitri, seeing the game was up, paled and bolted from the room without a word. "Okay, kid," Miller said, pulling a chair to her bedside. "Talk to me. Start from the beginning. Everything." As Genevieve, weak but lucid, recounted the entire story, the wellness retreat, the faked concern, the power of attorney, Dr. Alcott, the sedatives, the coded phone call, Frank Miller was already working. He was on his phone, making clipped calls to his network of contacts. "Yeah, it's me. I need flight manifests. Teterboro, Gulfstream G650 tail number N100 Delta Papa. I need destinations for the last 3 weeks. Zurich, Cayman Islands, you know the drill." "Yeah, Connor Montgomery. I also need a full workup on a shell corp, Haven Wellness Ventures, and a Dr. Alcott, a director upstate. And get me everything you can on Beatrice Novak. I want to know what she had for breakfast. Fast." Mr. Abernathy, meanwhile, was examining the power of attorney documents he had pulled up on his tablet. His face grew darker with every passing moment. "This is not my work," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "It's a forgery, a brilliant one, but a forgery. He used my letterhead, my signature block, but the language, the clauses, this gives him unlimited power. It's an instrument of pure theft. That boy." He trailed off, his disgust palpable. Just then, a sleek black town car pulled up to the main entrance of St. Francis Hospital. Connor Montgomery and Beatrice Novak stepped out. Dr. Alcott had called them the moment Genevieve was transferred, her voice frantic. Connor, realizing his plan was imploding, decided to go on the offensive. He would arrive at the hospital, play the role of the frantic husband, horrified by his wife's psychotic break and escape attempt, and use Alcott's falsified medical file to have her immediately committed to a psychiatric facility before she could talk to anyone. They strode into the hospital, their faces masks of worried solemnity. Bea was clutching Connor's arm, ready to play the supportive friend. They took the elevator to the maternity ward, rehearsing their lines. When they opened the door to Genevieve's room, they stopped dead. The scene was not what they expected. Genevieve was not alone and sedated. She was sitting up in bed, looking pale but resolute, and flanking her were the 2 men Connor dreaded seeing most in the world, the unimpeachable Arthur Abernathy and the relentless Frank Miller. For a moment no one spoke. The air crackled with the collision of 2 realities. Connor recovered first, his sociopathic charm clicking into place like a switch. "Gentle, oh my God, darling." He rushed forward. "I was so worried. Dr. Alcott called. She said you had some sort of episode that you ran away." Miller stepped in his path, a physical wall of old-school deterrence. "She didn't run away, Montgomery. She escaped." Connor's eyes flickered from Miller to Abernathy, and then to Genevieve. The mask began to slip. "What is this? What are you 2 doing here?" "We're here representing our client," Abernathy said, his voice like chipping ice, "who you, it appears, have systematically drugged, falsely imprisoned, and attempted to defraud of her entire fortune." Bea let out a small theatrical gasp. "Defraud?" "We were trying to help her. She's been unwell, paranoid. We were all so worried." "Save it, Beatrice," Genevieve said from the bed, her voice weak but steady. The sound of her full name from Jen's lips made Bea flinch. "I know everything. The trip to Zurich, the trust fund you couldn't crack." The color drained from Connor's face. It was one thing to be accused. It was another to be confronted with specifics. "Frank," Genevieve said, her eyes never leaving her husband's, "tell him what you found." Miller smirked a grim, joyless expression. Funny thing, the FAA. They keep records, he said, looking at a notepad. Gulfstream G650 property of Davenport Industries flew from Teterboro to Zurich on October the 28th, then from Zurich to Owen Roberts International in the Cayman Islands. Passengers Connor Montgomery and Beatrice Novak. Funny kind of wellness retreat, isn't it? Meanwhile, my sources at a certain Swiss bank tell me a Mr. Montgomery was asking a lot of questions about liquidating an irrevocable trust, a trust he couldn't touch. Every word was a nail in Connor's coffin. He was trapped, exposed, the architecture of his lies collapsing around him. He lunged for the last weapon he had, gaslighting. "She's delusional," he shouted, pointing at Genevieve. "This is what I was talking about. She's concocting these wild fantasies. Miller Abernathy, she's ill. I have medical files from Dr. Alcott to prove it." "You mean these files?" Miller asked, holding up a thin folder that one of his associates had just delivered. "The ones Dr. Alcott started frantically shredding about an hour ago. We got a court order to freeze her records. Turns out, when faced with a federal charge of medical malpractice and kidnapping, Dr. Alcott was very cooperative. She even provided us with records of your payments from your little offshore shell company." Bea saw the game was over. Her loyalty to Connor evaporated in a flash of pure self-preservation. "It was him," she blurted out, tears of genuine fear streaming down her face. "It was all his idea. He told me Jen was a danger to herself, that we had to protect the baby. He manipulated me. He told me he loved me." "Shut up, you fool," Connor hissed, turning on her. The raw, ugly truth of their relationship was finally laid bare under the harsh, fluorescent lights of the hospital room. They weren't partners. They were just two predators who had turned on each other the moment the hunt went wrong. Genevieve watched them not with hatred, but with a kind of profound, empty pity. These two people, the man she had loved and the woman she had called her sister, were hollow. At that moment, two uniformed police officers, accompanied by the retired NYPD Captain Miller, had appeared at the door. "Connor Montgomery," the captain said, his voice calm and official. "You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and unlawful imprisonment." Connor stood frozen, his handsome face a mask of disbelief. He looked at Genevieve, a final, desperate appeal in his eyes. But the woman looking back at him was not the trusting, gentle girl he had married. She was a survivor. She was a Davenport. And she was done with him. As they slapped the handcuffs on him, he finally broke. "You bitch," he spat at Genevieve. "You ruined everything." The officers led him away, a sputtering, defeated man, his Tom Ford suit looking absurdly out of place. Bea stood sobbing, utterly alone, until a second officer gently took her arm. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come downtown and give a statement." The room was suddenly quiet. The storm had passed. Genevieve leaned back against the pillows, her hand resting on her belly. She was safe. Her baby was safe. Frank Miller walked to the window, looking down at the police cars in the driveway. "It's over, kid." "No," Genevieve said softly, feeling the first stirrings of a new strength. "It's just beginning." The weeks that followed were a crucible. While the story of the Millionaire and the sinister wellness retreat became fodder for the New York media, Genevieve ignored the noise. From her father's old office at Davenport Industries, she orchestrated a stunning corporate coup. Armed with Frank Miller's evidence, she convened an emergency board meeting, had Connor summarily dismissed, and took her rightful place as chairwoman. The board, loyal to her father's legacy, rallied around her without hesitation. The legal battle was brutal but swift. Connor's defense, built on the lie of her mental instability, collapsed as his co-conspirators turned on him. Dr. Alcott and a terrified Beatrice Novak, desperate to save themselves, gave full confessions. Their testimonies laid bare the monstrous truth of the plan to have Genevieve declared legally incompetent, allowing Connor to seize control of her fortune, her company and her child, with B installed as the new mother. Genevieve directed her father's lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, to pursue every charge. They sued, froze assets, and clawed back every stolen dollar. The fight culminated 6 months later in a packed Manhattan courtroom. Genevieve, now heavily pregnant, took the stand. She was not a victim, but a titan. In a calm, unshakable voice, she recounted the entire ordeal, her eyes locked on the man who had tried to break her. Connor, haggard and defeated in a cheap suit, could not meet her gaze. The verdict was a formality. Connor Montgomery was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 25 years in a state penitentiary for his campaign of monstrous psychological terror. Dr. Alcott lost her license and served time, while B received 5 years for her cooperation. The haven was shuttered, its dark secrets exposed. 2 weeks later, Genevieve gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Arthur after her father and the steadfast lawyer who helped save her. One evening, while holding her son in the quiet of the nursery, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Frank Miller, showing a final wire transfer confirmation. Final assets recovered. Welcome home, Arthur Davenport. A real earned peace settled over her. Genevieve kissed her son's forehead. He was her true legacy, her irrevocable trust. She had faced the darkness and emerged into the light not just as a survivor, but as the architect of her own unbreakable future. The story was over, but her life was just beginning. Genevieve's story is a terrifying reminder that the most dangerous prisons aren't always made of steel bars. Sometimes they're wrapped in luxury and sold as love. It's a story about the ultimate betrayal, but more importantly, it's a story about the incredible power of resilience. She was stripped of her freedom, her trust, and nearly her identity, but they could not take her strength. In the end, it was her own courage and the unbreakable instinct of a mother protecting her child that brought down an empire of lies. Her journey shows us that even when you're trapped in the dark, there is always a way to fight your way back to the light. What did you think of Genevieve's incredible story of survival? What would you have done in her situation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, and you want to hear more true-life dramas and tales of incredible resilience, please hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and make sure you subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for listening.